Yes, on the aisle in the center there.
Mary Wentworth, Precinct 5. The last two speakers have put the finger on precisely why I oppose this idea of another fund. So I just go along with the idea of forgetting about this rather symbolic gesture that intends to send some kind of a message into the future. Thank you.
Yes, from the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just for the information of town meeting, the State Department of Revenue, which has some small interest in the matter since they look over our shoulders and make sure everything's well with finances in the community, recommends that towns set up special stabilization funds for specific interests or specific projects. Mass DOR doesn't see this as a symbol. It sees this as good planning. And as previous speakers have noted, it calls attention to the fact that we have capital needs and we're setting funds aside for those capital needs. There were 4 projects mentioned. None of those projects have been green-lighted by any committee. They've not been green-lighted by town meeting. If we're going to borrow for them, it's going to be a 2/3 vote, so there'll be considerable discussion. But please know that the Department of Revenue doesn't consider this a symbol. They consider this kind of activity a good management practice. Thank you.
Yes, in the center over here.
Jane Wald, Precinct 1. I just have a question and a point of information. Would a capital stabilization fund be held at this 15% reserve? That is, would the two funds together fall within the 5 to 15%? So if that's the case, I wonder if Finance Committee could maybe say a little bit about what their expectations of contributions to that new fund might be over a term of time. Just sort of as an example so we can understand the scale the fund might reach.
Ms. Moran or Mr. Pooler?
If I may, good evening, everybody. So I agree with everything everybody has said, which is a great thing to do in town meeting. Yes, this is somewhat symbolic, but that doesn't mean that symbolism doesn't have a real meaning. And to me, what setting up a capital stabilization fund would do is to acknowledge that we know that there are big projects coming down the road, and we want to have the money set aside to handle them. The size of those 4 big projects is such that I can tell you today, some of them are going to need some sort of debt exclusion override in order for them to get done. 1, maybe 2. There's going to be some need for debt exclusion override. In order to limit the impact of the debt exclusion, the idea of setting up capital stabilization right now is to start to set aside a little cash that we weren't going to spend anyway and put it in a savings account so that when it comes time to ask the voters for more money, we can ask for less. The other thing is that some of these projects are going to be done with just the regular debt that's coming out of the JCPC. And as you all know, we spend between 7.5 these days with a goal of 10% of our levy going toward capital. That's the JCPC goal. Some of those years, these projects are going to send us over that goal, anywhere reasonably close to those goals. So we need to start setting, it would be prudent to start setting money aside now to face that debt service that's going to be coming in the future. Now let me be frank. This is not the most important vote in the world if it goes one way or the other. We will still have the money. I want to assure you of that. It really, I think, comes down to whether it is prudent and in the town's best interest to start saying, we know we need to be setting aside $650,000 this year, and I think similar amounts in future years to directly answer your question. So that over the next 4 or 5 years, we have a sum of money so that we do start borrowing for these projects. we can minimize the impact to the JCPC budget or to the taxpayers. I think that's in the town's best interest. I think it's in all of our interest as homeowners here. If you decide to go that way, great. If you don't, we'll survive.